What's up, guys? Welcome back. This is the 23rd episode. I've got my good friend Bri Di Iorio. Her and I met through the sub two member mentorship. She's been in for about 4 months. And Bri, you're a private money lender. You've been doing deals. We were talking about right now. I'm helping you with one of your deals. So why don't you kind of kick us off and tell us like who you are and where you're from and how you got into REI?
Sure. It's been a journey, but like Adam said, Sabrina, or some of you may know me as Bri Di Iorio. Born and raised in Chicago, have a science background. Real estate is very, I would say, new to me. But yeah, I have 20 plus years of sales leadership training experience working for a Fortune 100 company. Um, Lived in Chicago, New York, and now I'm based in Pittsburgh. I've been here for about a year and a half. I started my journey last year, actually. One of my dad's business partners is actually an investor, and I've always just been really interested in kind of what he's been doing on the side. And just, in the past, I've always equated, sadly, to real estate investing to like being a realtor, because like I said, that just wasn't a space that I've ever been in too much. And so once I started to learn more about it and then joined Pace's group, it just my mind just exploded just learning about all these different creative ways that you can acquire properties and build your own portfolio. And then with private money lending, that was another area that just was quite fascinating to me. And that's pretty much how I started my journey, was more as a passive investor because I really didn't think I'd have the bandwidth to do anything more. And now I've gotten to the point where I'm also just building my own portfolio.
I bet you probably got that question a lot too, huh? Like, oh, you're in real estate? Like, what license, what certification, what broker, what dealer, what did you go out and get?
Yeah, most of them are not the Pace Morbies of the world, like where you would dive deep into a conversation about creative financing. So yeah.
Yeah, no, most people don't have the level of background that you can get, especially in Sub 2 or Gator or any of the other mentorships that a lot of people tune in from. And I thought that was interesting because I remember explaining to people when I told them that we do capital raising, it's like, well, so you're a realtor? No. So you're a wholesaler? No. So you're this other, like, you're a broker? Not quite.
Uh, that's always fun trying to explain that when you say you're a private money lender to people that don't. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and like you said, every once in a while you might come across a flipper and they're like, so you're like hard money? And you're like, I mean, kind of. Not really, but kind of.
And then throw the word gator in there, and that just really trips everyone up.
Yeah, they trip over themselves on that one. They're like, wait a minute, what the hell is a gator? Like, what does that mean? So you got into private money lending and partnerships because you wanted to be more passive. What kind of, I guess, interested you in that at first?
Well, I wanted to kind of hit the ground running, but not really running because I mean I've observed people that just kind of dove in too quickly, and then I've seen people that have just sat on the sidelines for too long. And so I thought, what can I do to get into the game quickly? That would allow me just to kind of generate income without actually having to be like committed to like finding properties and like stabilizing properties. And so that's kind of how I started with lending. Just kind of aligning myself with more or less, I'd say, experienced borrowers. Um, and I started with just lending, doing 12-month lends. It's primarily in the second position for sub two deals. And then once kind of I became more familiar with the different exit strategies, I started to become more focused on, acquisition and specifically more like acquiring single family homes for co-living.
Hmm.
Um, as you had mentioned earlier, I lived in Chicago, New York for most of my life. And it's very common for people to be renting by the room, even though since I kind of started this journey, it seems like a lot of people are learning about co living, like as if it's this new thing and it's been around for a very long time. And so that's kind of how I kind of moved from being more, I would say, passive, quote unquote, investor to being more active. And so now I kind of have that balance where I'm still doing lending, but I'm also more focused on building my own portfolio.
Yeah, because one of the things we had talked about kind of off the recording was that, obviously for your job, you travel basically 3 weeks out of four every week, every month.
Yeah.
It makes sense to start on the passive side, kind of start accruing interest, get interest payments in, you had mentioned that, you put that into a 401k so it can grow. Eventually, you'll have a much bigger pool to lend on as
Sure.
those loans start coming back. But besides the fact that you were already familiar with co-living, what others like what really got you into that space, that exit strategy versus the other ones that we see?
Co-living. I think just as a newer investor, I mean, for myself, I'm cautious. Like I'm cautious, right? Like I've seen people throw like their entire 401k into one deal and lose all their money, right? And I
Mhm.
just knew that like with co-living, that was a way that I could somewhat try to mitigate risk, so to speak. Whereas, obviously you don't have one person, one family that's paying your mortgage every month, but you have multiple people. So that was more or less an interest of mine. Um, and obviously we all know that there's an affordable housing crisis out there. So it's also, not only from a mitigating risk standpoint, but also, an opportunity to really help those in need where they're not in a position to afford, their own home or, renting their own apartments. This gives them that opportunity. And then there's also a lot of people that I've come to realize that are also transitioning. So as much as when I do rent by the room, I like to see people commit to a 12-month lease. I also see the benefit of kind of, being flexible in that because there's a lot of people that are, going through a divorce or some sort of hardship and they need kind of like that place to live as they transition, into their next home. And then you also have people that want to be a part of a community, which, when you have a co-living environment, it provides people with that sense of kind of belonging and it gives people the opportunity to kind of build relationships, and obviously there's the other side of it too, where there can be conflict, but for the most part, it offers people that sense of community.
Yeah, and I think that's a big one is the community, and we were talking about that between a few friends of mine, like Emma and so on, outside of this Zoom. Like, I think what's going to become a lot bigger, we're seeing, co-living is popping up, but then there's branches within co-living. There's sober living, there's other group homes,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's going to become more of a bigger exit strategy over the years. There'll probably be more red tape involved because, there's when you're dealing with whether it's rehab or intellectual or physical disabilities, there's always some kind of government involvement, which I think is the pro to being in, co-living as opposed to sober living.
Yeah, I would say two other areas of interest is one, supporting our veterans. I have a family of veterans, and I have my own opinions about how our government prepares them for civilian life. But veterans, and then also just like 55 and older community.
Yeah.
That's a big need because not everybody can afford to live in a retirement community and pay thousands and thousands of dollars a month. And people are living longer, so it takes a lot of money.
Yeah, it does. It takes a tremendous amount of money. I mean, between, like you said, retirement homes are expensive. And then even if they graduate from a retirement home to a nursing home, it's even more expensive.
Sure. Yeah.
So there's a huge need there. And I think, like you said, you're solving more than one issue, both on your side and on their side, right? Like you're providing affordable housing. But one of the things that most people don't know about co-living too is like the cash flow returns are much better than they would be over a typical long-term rental in the first place.
Sure. Yep.
That's what a lot of people are aspiring to be, is that the boring landlord. They want to have this huge portfolio of long-term rentals. And it's like, well, it's cool. You might cash flow 150 bucks, $200 a month on each one of those. And eventually after 100 properties, you might get somewhere. Or, like you said, you could start with something that already has a very clear demand. It's right here, it's in front of you, and you could just solve the problem.
Yep. Yep.
And so right now you're working on, I think, your first co-living that you're taking down by yourself, right? Because you worked
Yeah.
on with your partner.
Yes. In a city that I have other properties in with my partner. Yeah. San Antonio.
How many did you and your partner do together?
Three, but he's also on a track. He's been acquiring, I'd say probably between 2 to 3 a month. So
And you did the lens on all three of them?
Not all of them, no. So he's doing 2, 3 months. I've done plans on three of them, I want to say, since the start of the year. Yeah.
Were those all co-livings, Bree?
They're, well, great question. So they were all intended to be co-living. One of them we had to convert to an LTR because of some restrictions with jurisdictions and things like that. So
So they were all intended to be co-living, and I guess too, like you said, it made sense, right? You said you're already familiar with the model. You partner up with somebody, you do a few co-livings, and then you go off and you can do your
yeah,
own after that.
yeah, yeah. I think that's the best way to do it. Um, you also, I think too, side note, I think, there's all this, we have so many resources available to us, so many videos, but I think, as we get older, like we learn by doing, right?
Mm.
You can sit here and watch videos until you're, exhausted, right? But at the end of the day, what you're really going to learn is when you apply it. So,
Yeah, and I think that's a big point to be made, right? Like, because everyone always asks me that. They're like, "Well, what's the secret to capital raising?" It's like get the reps. What do
mhm.
you mean? Just what I said, right? Like go out, ask, and if they tell you no, you ask them, well, what would make it a deal? What
Yeah.
would make this better for you?
So that's what I think I love too about creative financing is it's that, I've had so many people that come to me and have, that have experience with, just being an investor have said, oh, this is the way to do it. This is the way to do it. And honestly, like when I see how many different ways you can reach a common goal, like there is no right or wrong way. And that's what I love about it is because it's all about negotiations and it's about creating win-wins between two people. And what works for you and I may not work for me and somebody else's deal, right? So, and that's what I love is that it's not black and white.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, it's not just creative finance, it's creative income, right? Like you can make money in any part of the transaction in any way that you want. But like you said, it's creating that win-win for you and a potential partner. And it's also just being realistic.
Mhm.
I think that's the hardest part is being realistic, like making sure your underwriting is tight, making sure that your numbers are there and they're not just some random number you just pulled out of nowhere. But you and I got together when we were working on your property. We did an underwriting Zoom with an underwriter, and we said, "Look, let's go through everything. Let's look at it all. Let's look at the neighborhood. Let's look at the one-bedroom rents in the area.
Yeah.
Like, how does this house compare?"
Yeah. And those are things too, obviously you want to be looking at before you like, you know, fully commit and close, right? Um, to make sure that it is going to be a performing property.
Yeah, you want to make sure the property is going to perform, and you want to make sure too, like that you don't run into the issue that your partner ran into, which is that you know there's some kind of regulations or jurisdictions that prevent whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah. And, I mean, I think, it's like, it's going to happen at some point, depending on how many properties you're acquiring, right? I mean, in that case, you had a house that was listed under, within a certain city, but then come to find out, we learned through the management company, right, that the actual township, does not allow for co-living. I mean, I just, yeah. And, when you're an out of state investor, that's one of the challenges, right? Is learning about different markets and counties and cities and understanding, what the can do, cannot, within those areas. So
Yeah,
it's
one
easier when you're, managing a portfolio in your backyard.
it is, but one of the important pieces of advice that we got on a Zoom a couple weeks ago from Carlin was like reach out to the planning and development committees of whatever township or whatever municipality you're in. And because that'll tell you what they plan on doing, right? If you reach out to the planning committee, they're going to tell you, like, yeah, we want to build more of these kinds of developments. So you can kind of see where the demand is going. They'll also tell you what they're dialing back on. For us here locally, it's been Airbnb. If you want to have a short-term rental, it's a big no-go in a lot of area, and they've created like isolated zones that are where STR is even allowable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is going to have a very clear, um, hindrance, or it's going to have a clear impact on your investment strategy as to what you should be doing versus what you shouldn't be doing with your money and your time and your effort.
Well, and I think that's why too, there's always that strong recommendation. You should always have two, if not even three exit strategies, right?
Yeah, I
I would deal
usually tell
with,
everybody three.
yeah,
And we saw that with yours too. You were like, well, if it doesn't work out as a co-living, then maybe we can do midterm. And we know that it pencils as a long term as well.
sure. Yeah. I always look for that. So these break even, right? It's the end goal at the end of the day. Worst case scenario.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the beauty about the co-living being kind of close to the midterm, right? Is like midterm is not quite long term. It will cash flow better. Um, and most people are looking for furnished. So if you do run into an issue, even after you get tenants in, it's not hard to make that transition.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And everybody handles co-living differently. You know, some people I've talked to people that don't even furnish the place. Um, but yeah, there's so many different ways of approaching this, right?
Yep. There's more than one way to skin a cat for sure.
I was trying to hold back from saying that because I didn't want to offend anyone, but that's where my brain kept going.
Bree, you know me well enough. We offend people all the time.
Fair.
Somebody's always going to be offended no matter what. Most of them get offended that these are on Sundays. They're like, "Well, this is my family day." It's like, "Cool. Well, then sacrifice one family day once a month. You'll be all right. You'll live, I promise."
Yeah, fair enough.
Like we show up when I can consistently do these, and if it happens to be that day of the week, it happens to be that day of the week. We're not catering to y'all.
That's true. You can't.
No, and if anything, that's what I love about you most is you're just like, you know what, dude, like I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I'm just gonna tell you what it is.
Yeah.
Bria Bria tell me that all the time. She's like, yeah, I think this is it. This is what I'm doing. This is the direction I'm going. Okay, have fun. Let me know how it works out. Keep me posted.
It's good to have a North Star.
Yeah, but you're like I think that's the one thing that you and I have kind of like bonded on in that friendship is like if I pick a direction, like I'm just going, and you could be like that's the wrong direction. I'll be like, cool, I'm going anyway.
That's funny.
A little bullheadedness sometimes never hurt.
Yeah. I mean, unless someone gives me a reason to do it differently, right? You have to be flexible and
Yeah,
open to their ideas and feedback. So,
yeah, you've got to be open to the criticism, right? Because if not, you will fall on your face. And like I said too, that's the big thing with underwriting is that it changes. You might have these original numbers planned out, and then you look at it again, and you say, okay, well, I didn't consider this, and this. But like I said, your deal's pretty tight. I think I think you're gonna get a PMP for it or a PML either way, depending on which direction you get the feedback on. And guys, we're gonna do that deal breakdown here in a little bit. But if you guys also have questions about your deals, if you want us to look at anything, let us know. We're here to answer questions as well. Because like I said, Bree's done 3 deals with her partner in 4 months, and now you've self-funded your own deal. So a deal a month for getting started is not bad at all, and you cut down the ignorance tax way more than what most people do.
yeah, we try. We try.
But we hit on that earlier. Like that's the only real way to cut down the ignorance tax is with the reps. And one thing that we had said off of the recording was like, I know people personally that they've been in for 2 years and have not done a single deal, whether it's on their own or with a partner or anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I'd want to know why. Is it time commitment? Is it just fear of taking action? Is it, lack of knowledge? I mean, there could be a number of different factors contributing to that.
I think it's usually just fear of loss masked by them. But the excuse that they will give you is lack of knowledge.
You learn from your mistakes. I'd say at some point you just gotta kind of throw yourself into it. At some point. Like I say that cautiously because people that end up on two ends of the spectrum, right? There's people that just throw themselves in within a week of starting any mentorship program. And then there's people on the other end of the spectrum, to your point, that have been in this game for like 2 years and still haven't done a deal.
Yeah. But I mean, like I said, you've done a handful of deals. You've kept yourself safe through all of them. And we've
And
had that conversation too. Like we've had to be like, hey, you're dealing with a little bit of imposter syndrome here. I need you to kind of pull your head out of your ass a little bit.
yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just being humble. Like I just, not that person that's going to show up saying I have all the answers. I think people think that you just fake it until you make it, but most of us are pretty kind of dialed into that personality type. We can pretty much pick that out pretty quickly. And I'm just pretty authentic. I show up as I am and I say things like it is. And I think for the most part, people respect and appreciate that.
Right. And I think I also had to remind you that, when you started a sales career, you didn't start out on top.
No, actually, I didn't. I actually started moving down. Yeah,
So
had to recalibrate. Yeah.
when you got into sales, was that a transition from something else that you had to like downgrade to?
No, when I was in sales, just when I started in sales, I kind of think I showed up as the way I thought my company wanted me to show up as, or my customers wanted me to show up as. And probably 10 months in, I was actually losing business. And thankfully, my manager at the time, who had a lot of confidence in me, just kind of sat me down, had a conversation, and was like, look, you need to show up as who you are, let your personality come through. And ever since then, it was like an aha moment. It's kind of scary when you think about it. It's like, so it takes more effort to show up as someone that you're not, right?
Yeah.
And yet people do that all the time. But thankfully for me, I learned that, I'd say fairly quickly. Um, just changed course. And ever since then, things have obviously been very different. So,
Yeah, I think the only thing you needed me to remind you of is that those skills are transferable. You didn't leave sales. You still have sales. You still brought sales and leadership and communication and honesty with you
yeah,
into
that's,
your REI journey.
yeah.
And you live and die by those, and that's why you're here.
Hopefully we're going to get it done over here, Adam.
Like I said, you'll be fine. You've done great so far.
Thank you.
Like I said,
Like,
you kept
right.
yourself safe through all your deals so far, and you're getting the interest only payments. So as long as
Yeah,
those get called back in on time.
yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit. So, because you as a private money lender, right? They have to do their own due diligence on the deal, but you have to do your due diligence on the person as well as the deal. So, what kind of things are you typically looking at when you look at somebody's deal?
Well, I'm obviously looking at the deal, but I'm also looking at the person who's, borrowing. I'm looking at what kind of experience they have. I mean, it's not to say that I'm not going to lend on someone who's doing their first deal because I mean, we can't all be looking to just partner with people with experience, right? We've all started somewhere, and that's been with no experience, right? Um, a lot of how I've assessed whether it's a good deal is based on who's asking for the money, essentially. Because at the end of the day, and maybe this is, maybe not everybody has the same mindset, but I'm also looking at how many other deals have they done, right? I mean, at the end of the day, they may lose 50, 60, $70,000 on this one deal, but they're going to get it from somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, so it sounds to me like you're looking at collateral, right? Because if they've done other deals, then they have the HUDs to prove it, and usually they have other deals that you can cross collateralize, especially in the second lien position. And I imagine you're probably also looking at like those things like cash on cash as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What kind of cash on cash numbers are you typically looking for when you're looking at a deal for a loan, right? Like we understand it's different on equity.
like you and I talked about, I mean, looking at, anywhere from like 15 to 20, 25%.
And because I would say too, right? Like typically once it starts to get above 25, that's where you're like, all right, I really need to do my due diligence on these deals because that's
That
where
is correct.
start
And
to
that
get
that
inflated.
is very much correct. And I think too, as like newer investors, I think a lot of times people are so focused on what the ROI is. I mean, for me, that actually it's like a red flag to me, actually. Not like a red flag as in don't do the deal, but just red flag like stop and not go. We need to take some more time to look into this a little bit more.
Yeah, we need to underwrite this deal appropriately because, like you said, there could easily be a misplaced zero. There could be some maybe just overestimated numbers, even if not intentionally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have you seen that a lot with some of the deals that you've looked at over the last few months?
No, because I'm very, very, very selective and I don't look through every single deal and see if that's something I'm going to lend on. I usually kind of start with the person.
Yeah, so you typically vet the person, say, okay, this person's all right. If they have a deal, they can bring it to you,
Yeah.
and then you'll look at the deal itself.
Because honestly, for me, and this is just me at this part that, at this stage in my journey, I mean, there's deals everywhere that you can lend on, right?
Hmm.
Yes, I do, Felicia. Um, but you can lend out your money any all day, any day, right? But for me, I'm lending with deals with people that I know.
Yeah, people that you already know, like, and trust, they've made it past that first barrier of entry.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do use a transaction coordinator. You and I talked about that the other day. We're going to try to help find you somebody else, but
Well, yeah. I mean, I'd like to have a couple options. Let's just say
fair enough. I think everybody needs a couple options. You never know, when someone in that key position is going to fail you.
yeah, and Felicia, to your question, I know a lot of people don't use TCs. I do personally because at the end of the day, I think, the stronger the team of people around me, the safer I'll be, essentially. But with that being said, I've had TCs that have made mistakes. I've had TCs that just didn't that just didn't close the loop on things, essentially. And I've seen that with TCs that have assisted with close, and I've seen that with TCs that have assisted with post closes. So I've seen it on both ends of it. What was the
Begin.
question from her?
She said, beginning with the end in mind, I see. And yeah, that's true. You have to begin with the end in mind. And I think, like I said, Bri does a good job of that by vetting the person first. Because if not, if you just look at every deal, it's very easy to lose track and or to forget some of the important steps like vetting the person or vetting the deal. Because
Yeah.
I see it all the time. They send us co-livings that sometimes I saw a co-living where the pitch deck said the cash on cash was like 45%. Like that's really good if true. But now we need to go and do the hard work and verify that that's actually true.
Yeah.
Because if it's not, well, then you definitely don't have a deal.
That's right.
What others is there anything else in particular you'd look for besides the borrower? Like, what are you looking for in the deal that would make it, one worth lending on?
Um, Given that this is I'm like more on the beginning side of my journey, for me personally, I'm looking at like what are their exit strategies, what space are they in, right? So like for me personally at this point in the game, I'm not really interested in like fix and flips. I tend to gravitate more towards deals that are of interest to me. So like for example, like single family, co-living, multifamily. um that's another kind of thing that I might look at too, because I'm a lender, but I also like to kind of have my eyes on like what's about, have my eyes on like the process a little bit. So I hope that from those experiences too, I continue to reinforce those relationships with people, but also I'm like learning what is it that they're doing too, right? That's making them successful. I'm not a here's my money, talk to you in 12 months kind of girl. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I don't want to say that and have that give the impression that I'm like, oh, I'm in the trenches with that person. It's more like what's going on, where are we at with things, kind of.
Yeah, I think communication is really big, and that's what I've been trying to teach more of the people on the borrower side is you have to understand the person interpersonal skills that are required to get into the deal in the first place, right? Like you don't need them calling you up every day and spilling their guts.
No, no,
Helpful.
or even every week. No, no, no. That's not what I'm saying at all. But
But
I'm
you also
circling
don't
back.
need them, ignoring you for 3 months at a time either.
Oh yeah, no, but I do check in. How are things going? Are we getting these properties filled? Like what's going on essentially?
Yeah. Um, what have you been seeing with stabilization times and holding costs on the co-living side?
Depends on the person who's filling the properties. I've seen people, fill properties essentially before they've even gone live, and I've seen people that have had properties sit vacant for 5 months because they're so committed to a certain price by room. So there's a spectrum, and that's using examples of homes in big cities, so to speak. So it's somewhat comparing apples to apples, right? I'm not talking about a house like in the middle of like rural America versus a home in like let's just use Atlanta as an example.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the other thing with co-living too, is it works best where it's population dense.
But I've also seen people who have homes in like densely populated cities that are still not filling homes in the way, in my opinion, they should be moving. Like, I don't think it's ideal to have a home sit for 6 months.
No,
And
probably not.
yeah, I think we would all agree on that. But
Yeah.
I've also seen, and there's a number of factors. I've seen some people just so focused on acquisition and less on stabilization, which is a red flag for me, I'll be honest, because I don't know how you keep your PMPs or your lenders happy in cases like that. I mean, lenders may be easier because, they're still getting, for the most part, their interest checks every month. But for your PMPs that are committed to like getting cash flow, I don't see how that's like creating a good ideal situation there.
Well, and I think you said this the other day when we were on the phone, like it's like a Ponzi scheme, right? Because at that point, if your properties aren't stabilized, but you're out raising more money, you're just bringing in more money, bringing in more money just to acquire more and more properties and they all sit vacant, then, well, you're SOL if one of those goes under or all of them go under.
That's right. So I would say another thing, partnering. No, I wouldn't even say no. Let's not say partnering. When I'm lending on deals, I'm also seeing doesn't what doesn't work. What not to do.
Well, and I think that's the beauty of being involved in the transaction before you do a transaction solo, right? Like whether you're the TC and you've seen other people's deals go south because of bad communication with the lender. I've
Sure.
had that happen as a connector. Um, or as the lender itself, and you see like, with your other friends that are lenders or partners, like this is what killed their deals. Learn from their experience.
Or it's on its way to be getting a kill deal. It's like you're just watching the train, like,
Yeah.
about to collide.
Well, and that's the other thing too, right? Is it's like when it's not your deal, it's easier to observe that and you can see the train start to derail. You can see like,
Sure.
I don't know, this person's not communicating well, that they're not making their interest payments on time. This thing is slowly starting to go off the rails.
Or they're making their interest payments on time, but they're not stabilizing the property. And that's that. And that's another, that just brings something else to mind. Like if I'm lending and someone comes to me with an equity partnership opportunity, right? And I see that your focus has been primarily in acquisition and less on stabilization. What do you think the likelihood of me wanting to come in as an equity partner is? It's pretty low.
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely see that if, and some people they're like, oh, well, I have a system. I acquire this many properties and then we stabilize all of them. Well, that's great, but you still have to stabilize them.
That's right. We don't care how you get there, just get there. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't give a shit how you make the money. Just go out and make the damn money.
Yeah. I don't care if you're on your second property manager and you're posting it in like 10 different sites and you have, an asset manager, a leasing agent, just whatever it takes to get it done.
Talk about that a little bit too, right? Like if I am one of your borrowers and things are starting to go wrong, how much of that do you actually want to know versus like, dude, just go out and just figure it the fuck out.
Well, let's just be honest. How many people are going to be really honest to let you know? I mean, things are starting to go south. I think you see it before you hear it, right?
Oh, totally. I think you probably see it, and they're probably, if I had to guess, they're not saying anything until it threatens whether they can make the interest payment or not.
That's fair. Yeah.
And then they would come to you and say, "Hey, Bree, I know I got an interest payment coming up in 2 weeks, but might be a couple days late."
Yeah, that's an interesting one, actually.
Because it sounds like
I
you
have
haven't been confronted with that yet, but I'm sure
to
you've
navigate through
seen it.
that. I've had to navigate through that, but um, I've had to navigate through that. But nothing that was alarming to me. It was more like we're good. And what I mean by that is, um, just there was issues with like the bank and stuff like that. Eventually, that same month, I got the money, but I'm not someone that's like, after a day or two concerned. I also moved to a city where the mail is really shitty. So, like, if I don't have a check in the mail within the first week, alarm bells aren't necessarily going off either. But I've also transitioned from being a private money partner to a lender too. And there's been, that transitional period as well. But I've never been in a situation where someone came in, 30 days late. Like I'm not waiting, we're not waiting 30 days to have that conversation. But I'm also not on the phone after 2 days either. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You kind of play that juggling act a little bit, right? You're balancing it on the knife blade, so to speak, of like, you know, I'm not necessarily concerned. I might shoot you a text after a week,
There
but
you go.
we're definitely not waiting.
Yeah, and I mean, and I've heard of lenders that have lost their mind after 24 hours of a payment being late. I mean, I'm not like that.
No, and it sounds like it's probably like most other management or leadership, right? Like, don't just come to me and spill your guts and tell me all the problems you have. Come to me and say, "Hey, Bree, I've got this problem, but I also have a solution, or this is the solution. These are our options."
Yep.
Right? Like if I'm having bank issues, I would come to you and say, "Hey, Bree, we're having issues with the bank. We're waiting on this paperwork to come through so it can get signed or whatever."
Yeah. I mean, because I think we've all been there. I've been there. I mean, there's been days where it's been easier for me to transfer and quicker for me to transfer 5 figures than it has been for me to transfer $1,000. I mean, it's the reality. I mean, things happen.
Yeah. And every bank is different too. And what I've learned the hard way from being in business over a long period of time is some banks just don't like to talk to each other.
No, I'm learning that right now, actually, to be quite honest. So
Oh,
much so that I'm going to not, and I'm not going to mention any bank names, but I'm learning that right. I've been going through that for a month, and I just kept thinking, hey, this is a situation that's going to get better and better, and it's not. And I actually called one of those banks on Friday, was on hold for about 10, 15 minutes. And, my patience level is 0. I hung up and I just made the decision, you know what? I'm not using this bank. I'm going to have to just start transferring things over to another bank because it's just not worth the headache. And at the end of the day, if I've got a business account and I got to wait 5 days for you to clear $1,000 when you have full access to my account and you see the money's there,
yeah.
that I'm just not doing that.
Yeah, we have two banks. We have a national bank here and a regional bank here, and they refuse to talk to each other. And so any check, if I have that bank and you have the other bank, takes a week, no matter what.
It's ridiculous.
It is, it's obscene, but like you said, that's part of doing business, right?
Uh, Katie, no, it's not Bank of America. Actually, I do bank with Bank of America, but not with for business.
Blink 3 times. Katie's a hot mess.
Like it. I like how she thinks though.
No, I don't think it was Bank of America, but I will tell you, Region sucks.
Regent?
Yeah,
I've never even heard of them.
it's mostly like a Gulf Coast thing.
Okay.
They and I don't mind throwing them under the bus because they banned me from banking there anyway, so they can suck it.
Oh, but yeah, I don't know how banks market themselves for like business banking. If we can't even get $1,000 through in 5 days, it's like, I'm sorry, guys. Like, I have a girlfriend that old school. She's like tells me about she wants to put more and more of her money under the mattress. I'm like, you know what? I can totally see that because the valiant effort sometimes, and see, I'm getting a little fired up about this because I've been through this a lot, but the valiant effort that I need to make to get money either moved or out is just unbelievable.
Yeah, Felicia says she agrees. Like,
I mean, it's unbelievable.
well, my issue with them was
Yeah.
Omar got banned from
Capital
Capital.
One. Capital One has not done me wrong yet, actually. They have not done, I've had them for almost like, I want to say 20 years, actually. They've been good to me.
So someone issued me a fake check and I tried to put it in the bank account not knowing it was a fake check. And
Okay.
Region banned me because they said it was obviously a fake check. Like, oh, I'm
Adam,
sorry.
Adam, let's just be honest. You were just hoping it wasn't a fake check, right?
Yeah, they didn't receive the product that they paid for yet. So I was like, well, let's see if the check clears. If it clears, then they can come get the product, and if it doesn't, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
Omar said that happened to him, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't realize that I was an expert in anti-money laundering.
Well, I'm not either. I'm not either. Apparently, I mean, even if you do have legitimate checks, they're always being investigated. I've learned that one too.
Yeah,
Everything's
especially
being investigated.
especially Bri, 25 years old. I didn't realize I was an expert in anti-money laundering.
No, and I get it. I really do. I do. I get it. But I think we've just swung to the other end of the spectrum, right? Or, and to the point where it's like, it's ridiculous.
It
Yeah.
is. It's gotten insane, but guys, just be careful and like Bree said, maybe don't put your money under a mattress necessarily. Maybe put it in a property though.
Yeah.
And
And appreciating property.
yeah, and appreciating property in a market with some
And it's
population.
cash flowing a little bit too. Oh, Omar said it's too risky for them.
I don't know what to tell you, Omar. Like I said, they gave me the same treatment, and I had to fight them to get the check for the balances so I could switch banks. But it is what it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely put your money in a property that the underwriting is tight on, that is probably in a red state with population growth and or maybe some development plans. Because like I said, if you check with those planning commissions, like one of the RV parks we're looking at right now is where they're putting a new LNG plant in.
Hmm.
Guess who comes in all the time with RVs? LNG plant workers, the people that are actually building the plant up, or even the people that do turn, right? The people that come in to stabilize the plant and then they're there for like a midterm and then they leave
Where is this at, Adam?
in Louisiana.
Louisiana.
Yeah, because along the coast, there's lots of RV parks for that reason. Like you can, you don't have any kind of building maintenance to really worry about with floods. You know, if you've got people there, they just hook up to the RVs, and if a flood comes through or a hurricane comes through, they just up and leave.
Interesting.
So it is what it is. But yeah, it's one of those things where that's one of the things that is making us consider those two parks. It's two parks in two different areas, but both have up and coming LNG plants because natural gas is one of the biggest exports in our state. But again, like you have to do a little bit of research on your market to know those things,
For
to know
sure.
if it's a good investment or not.
Yeah.
So yeah, but Bree, if you want, we'll pull up your deal sheet. We'll break it down a little bit. I haven't seen anybody. If anyone does have deals or questions that they want to ask about their deals, they can always raise their hand. but we'll take a quick look at yours and we'll explain why you think it's a good deal, and maybe that'll give some light to a few people.
Sure.
You ready for it?
Who, me?
Yeah. You had
Yeah.
a look on your face like, I don't know about this.
I mean, I don't care. Like, I'm not married to my properties. You know what I mean? Like, there you go.
So this is the underwriting calculator that you sent me.
Yeah.
We'll hide that. We don't want the address going out there. Didn't realize I didn't blank that out.
I'm
So
sorry.
you got a single family home. It's that you're doing a co-living on. It's currently a 3-bed, 2.5 bath with 1,246 square feet. That's all it was existing. The current estimated market value, which is an average, is 192 from Zillow and Redfin. So, real quick, you said from Zillow and Redfin. Did you take the average of the two of those?
No, actually, it's just Zillow. I'm sorry for the miscommunication.
Gotcha. Because that's what I tell a lot of people to do is like when you're doing comps, and actually Augie and I talked about this on a property last week that I had. Like, because he mentioned he did this. You go to Zillow, go to Redfin, maybe go to a third site, yeah, and just take the average. That'll give you your conservative ARV. So your current estimated price per square foot is about 154. Estimated post rehab, none right now. Entry fee was 29, so we'll call it round up to 30. Post close, HOA arrears 2,000. Rehab estimate plus the 1-bedroom conversions an additional 25. Furnishings is 10. CapEx budget is 3. Total investment is just under 70. So with this, we were talking about finding you an equity partner that would come in at 70, and they would get 50% equity in the property, and they would get a 50-50 split on the cash flow, right?
Thank you, Katie.
What did Katie say?
The spreadsheet is good. I'll tell you, there was this, Adam and I were just saying before the call started, I'm like, I went through a spreadsheet that Adam had, and it was very lovely. It had a lot of numbers, a lot of information. But I think the easier, the more simplified, the better, right? It's just easier on the eyes.
Yeah, the underwriter that helped us with the initial underwriting, his spreadsheet's great. It's also very, very complicated to understand. And if you're not a nerd like him, and I don't mind telling him that, it's difficult to read. So yeah, you've got your PITIs at 1,588. Your insurance costs, property taxes are blank
I
right
didn't
now.
break it down there. So yeah, so the PITI, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, is at 1588.
Yeah. Property management is 280, which is estimated at an 8% fee. Was that something you got a quote for?
Yeah, so I currently have a property manager in place. Their fee is 8%, and then they'll take 50% of the first month's rent. So that 8% is based off of the cash estimated, not cash flow, estimated rent as a 4-bed.
Okay. Estimated vacancy was for 6%, 141. Mortgage servicing is $25, which is pretty good. Most debt servicing is a little bit more expensive than that. Pest control twice a year at $100 a visit on average. So yeah, you average that out, $20 a month. Water and trash is also an estimate. Electricity estimate. Gas, no gas, so it's all electric because it's a newer build, right?
Yeah, build 2019, I believe.
Yeah, 2019 build is what I saw in the deal sheet.
Yeah.
You've got internet with 65, yard maintenance at 40, and that's 40 monthly, which is actually really good. Shit, dude, mine's like 40 a week.
Well, in San Antonio, like the grass well, I guess it depends on the year, but there's not a lot of grass to be cut too. Doesn't grow very much.
So you get your cleaning at $100, and that's every 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Which is just for the common area in the bathroom. Brings your estimated monthly up to $24.84, so just shy of $2,500. Rent bedrooms with in-suite bath. Weekly rent.
Oh, you know what? We needed to flip that one around. I'm sorry.
What's that? Oh, these numbers.
Yeah, I apologize.
That's all right. If it'll let me do it. 225, and then this should be 195.
Yeah. And then just switch it, go from, yeah. And then for number of rooms, you'll just do 1-3 instead of 3-1.
So 1-3. There we go. That looks about right.
Yep.
Because I was gonna say either way, your gross monthly rent remains the same, right? It's a 3510.
Yeah. I just wanted to read right.
Yeah, that's fine. So 3510 minus 2484 brings you to conservatively 1025 a month cash flow on a property that requires very little rehab. Is pretty good. And that's what you and I were saying before the call too, that
Needs a little bit more rehab than I anticipated because it was intended to be a little bit more turnkey than it was. So,
yeah, but I mean, even still, like your post rehab, including the conversion, um, at 25 isn't bad. Especially anything older than that would probably require much more than that.
true.
You know, anything older than that, I would predict you'd probably be looking at like 30, 40 grand in rehab. So you still managed to keep it relatively turnkey and at, a decent cash flow number as well.
Yeah.
So that's what we're looking at though is, Bri's offering to find a PMP, so a private money partner that can bring in 70 that we can secure with an LLC and on the deed. And that be 50-50 split for the cash flow. It's in an appreciating market, so they get appreciation, they get depreciation on taxes. And what else, Bri? What else am I missing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the cash flow can be negotiable, right? In terms of what we land on as far as like, the split amount.
And for those of you that were wondering, let's see, where was it? Headed up. Here
Did
it
you
is.
buy a book at him?
I did not buy the book yet. I need to. My buddy Garrett, who's also in sub 2, he was a guest on here at the end of May. He recommended that I get that book.
I bought it. I haven't read it yet though.
So that's the house. Looks good, looks clean. These from the listing, or did you take those, Bri? Just out of
Those are
curiosity.
from the listing.
Nice. Build 2019.
Yeah,
Does have an HOA with only 125, but you did check. Obviously, there's no rental restrictions because you and I had that conversation. You read through the bylaws.
that's correct.
To those that are curious, it's 20 minutes from the San Antonio International Airport, 10-minute walk to the bus stop, less than 8 miles from the Alamo Dome, 9 miles from the Riverwalk, and 8 miles from the Brooke Army Medical Center.
Yep.
So, I mean, like I said, I think that's good because, you don't I've been seeing that bus stops have been a little bit less important lately in the co-livings. More people are going for a little bit higher of a clientele that just want to save on places where they have really expensive one-bedroom rents. And I think, with yours, because you don't have, with there not being any restrictions, you have no parking issues because there's plenty of on and off street, right?
Yeah, so it's interesting. There's some open lots within the community. So there's plenty of street parking, if that makes sense. Um, the houses are somewhat closer in proximity to one another, but there's plenty of street parking.
And it looks like there's a little bit of off street too. It looks like you could probably fit 3 cars in that driveway between the garage and the driveway.
Yeah, but they're actually, so it's full disclosure, there's like a little roundabout like in front of the driveway. It's very strange. It serves no purpose, so it does prevent like some parking from up front. There's more, it's a little bit more limited.
Got it.
I don't even
And
know what to describe it. It literally doesn't serve a purpose. I don't even know who figured that one out, but
also, to be clear, guys, there's no COE on this because Bri already self-funded. She's selling 50% equity in the deal that she self-funded in order to get some money back out. But the 70K covers the entry fee, the closing costs, TC, repairs, furnishings, 3 to 4 months contingency budget, capex budget, and the 1-bedroom conversion, which again is a lot to cover for 70K, but you had your numbers on point, and that's what matters. So let me ask this, guys: is there any questions about that deal? Like, is there anything that you guys are seeing that you would want to ask Bri that why she saw it this way or why that works?
I have a question.
Yeah, what you got?
When I was, let's say, looking at, um, I'm thinking, okay, you have no property taxes because you're just funding this. Is that what you're saying, Adam? Is that what you were saying?
No, she was saying that she just didn't break out the property taxes
Oh,
out of
gotcha.
the PITI. So
Okay.
that's why the insurance and the property taxes here are blank is not because they don't exist. She already has it. She had gotten an insurance quote, and insurance came in extraordinarily low for that area, right, Bree? It was like,
it was in the ballpark of $700 for the yeah. I mean, I've gotten quotes anywhere from up $700 all the way up to $1,800 for like a dwelling or landlord policy for this one. So if I do go move forward with State Farm insurance, it'll actually drop the PITI probably like $50 a month once the current homeowners policy is replaced.
yeah, but she figured the property taxes in because she had made sure that it cash flows in LTR, so she got it with equity in the deal,
Okay.
which is hard to do in Texas because property taxes are usually so high.
And
Do you?
this is your buy and hold?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Did they disclose to you? I was in San Antonio about a
Sure.
month ago, and I have a cousin there and I have a nephew there, and both of them had the crack issues that calls up in the 5 figures to get them fixed. Did they talk to you about that and the San Antonio soil and all of that?
You said crack issues?
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Because they didn't talk to you about that. Well, if you get a house and you have those crack issues, it's gonna cost in like 30,000 or something to get your house, for them to go under the house to raise it up some kind of way and do all that work on the foundation, because it also cracks at the top.
Okay.
Kind of, so you might want to check into that.
And you're saying this is more specific to San Antonio?
Yes, yes.
And just out of curiosity, why is that?
The soil, something about the soil. And I
Yeah,
know this is a newly built one,
fairly, yeah.
2019, but you
Yeah,
may want to check to see if they have it, guarded for crack issues.
interesting. Okay. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I wouldn't be surprised. We have the same issue here in Louisiana where we have a lot, the soil being so marshy, it shifts. And so, like, the property that I did boots on the ground for a couple weeks ago, the one that Augie looked at, it needed shoring, and that's why, because even though the house is raised, the pillars that the beams rest on shift, and like Felicia's saying, if the house shifts and bends, it can cause separation, and that's a big issue. But
The only thing I'm like familiar with is that not only, I shouldn't say only, but it's not in a flood zone. So that's something that I'm typically I'm looking at.
yeah, San Antonio is more landlocked, so I wouldn't think inherently that you would have those issues, but like Felicia said, it's usually just good to check.
Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Oh, you're welcome.
We got any other questions about the deal, how it works, or how it flows, or like I said, why Bri picked it? If we do.
No one wants to poke any holes in it. You're not gonna make me feel bad. You're not gonna be calling my baby ugly.
If anything, I think it's a good thing, Bri. I think that means that you did a good job.
No,
And
or they're just not listening. I mean, come on, like
they don't have any holes to poke.
they're all sleeping. No, I'm just kidding. They're all eating dinner.
It's it's the same way on some of the interviews when we have very few questions. It just means that you did a good job answering them all.
I
Chris,
don't like to make assumptions, but thank you.
I was gonna say the purple is very you, Bri. That's your style.
Hey, you never know. Maybe my next one I'll make it pink.
Hey man, I'd rock it. Why not? We'll roll with it. We'll roll with the
As
punches.
long as what needs to be there is there, right? Oh, Grady. Hi, Grady.
Grady, what's up, dude? We were just doing a deal breakdown. We were saying that Bri's looking for a PMP. This is her underwriting here, and so I know you've been doing good. Grady's been underwriting a lot of co-livings lately. He's looking to start acquiring a couple of his own.
Cool.
The way it's laid out.
Got you, Chris. Thank you.
Sorry, Chris, you can be a man and admit you like purple too. Love you, bro. Does this calculation sheet have to be purchased or are you sharing?
Felicia, I could share with you. I gotta be honest. The amount of things that it costs people money to acquire is just mind blowing. Felicia, I'd be happy to share it with you for free.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If you want, Felicia, send Bri your email and we'll make sure that you get it. Guys, I'm shocked that y'all don't have more questions about the property or questions about your own deals. That's half the fun. Bri was all nervous that y'all were gonna grill her with all kind of questions she didn't have the answers to. And look at her, she's done fine. She's smiling.
Well, here's the other thing, when you were talking about just like how I kind of landed, where I'm at with like acquiring sub two deals, I think they're easier to follow. I'm not doing any like, hard math or anything like with fix and flips or figuring, I'm not a wholesaler, right? I tried to wrap my mind around that in the beginning and I was like, oh boy, this is not my thing. Despite loving math, acquiring sub two properties, it's easier in my opinion, even though I've heard people refer to it as a more advanced strategy. I think it's easier.
I think it can be more moving parts, right? Like with the file. But since you're not
That's true. Right. Yes.
Right, you're not the TC, you're not handling all those things.
Right.
You're just kind of following the storyline and following the trail. Like, okay, the seller bought it for this much. They have this much left on the mortgage. This is what their PITI is. This is, where I can possibly come in and either do rehab or reduce costs. And this is what I'm acquiring it for.
Yeah.
So this is the purchase price based on the condition it's in now.
Yeah.
So it makes for a pretty easy, clean break.
Yeah.
Because you said all the other ones you were doing were second lien position as well. The deal that you lent on, were those all because those were sub twos?
Not because they were sub twos, but they are sub twos. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, not that I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of people that will only lend on first lien.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of them out there, and we see them all the time too. And
I've never done a first lien. Call me crazy. Just hasn't worked out that way.
I mean, I think it makes sense though, because like
Of
there's
course, it just hasn't come, it just, the stars haven't aligned where I've, done that.
well, yeah, just like Abraham Gray, he does, typically does first lien only, but he has the funds. He's got to buy out the mortgage to be the first lien. Which
I'll,
platform is the
I'll
best?
just I'll throw one of my emails in here. There you go.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's like I said, sub twos are easy to follow, and there are a lot of people that are scared of lending in second lien because it can be risky. But what are some of the other things that you've done to kind of secure yourself in that second lien?
Obviously, like all the same things that I think everyone else does with getting like promissory notes and things like that. I mean, I also look at the deal too, and I'm looking at the breakdown of numbers, and it's like, do you have enough cash flow to pay me an interest?
Are you looking at like the LTV and like I said, cross collateral and stuff like what we mentioned earlier as well?
Cross collateral, primarily because with these sub two deals, there really isn't a lot of equity built into it.
No, more often than not unless it's a hybrid.
Right, exactly. And I haven't done many hybrids, and not because I've been, it's been intentional. It's just basically, like I said, it's worked out that way.
Right. It's worked out that way with like we said before, the people that you vetted, they've come to you with deals and they just happen to be sub twos.
Yeah. And guys, the other thing too is I should say it. I would be very unhappy if I didn't get paid back. Let me just put it this way. But I don't invest more than I can lose, if that makes sense. Like I'm not going to put all my eggs into one basket. Um, whereas I see a lot of people doing that. You would
Yeah.
never, you would always look to diversify your portfolio, your investment portfolio. I would do the same thing if I was lending. Put a little bit here, 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 and here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes the most sense because, like you said, that's all it takes is that one property. If all your eggs are in that one basket, doesn't matter how good the returns are.
I have only at this point done, so to answer Chris's question, do you want to read it out loud or just?
Yeah, have you done any other position other than second, depending on the outcome?
Um, no, but like for example, this here, I'll just use this as an example. So I'll use my deal as an example. So this property has two liens on it. It has their mortgage assistance lien. So like there's one lien on it that's like 16K and another one that's 6K. The 6K will fall off after a refi or when I go to sell the property, but there's that 16K in it. For example, if I was going to lend on this, would I be too concerned about it? Probably not, because there's already equity built into the property. So I think there's just a number of factors you just have to look at. And it's not because I have a high risk tolerance. I want to be clear on that because I think that's an important part of it too. I don't look at these things that have like, I'm not a black or white kind of girl, if that makes sense. Some people pull up these spreadsheets and they want to know down to like the penny. I don't look at that. Like, I mean, I look at the numbers, right? I don't want to, lose credibility by saying I don't look at the numbers. Of course, I look at the numbers, right? But I'm not drilling it down to pennies and dollars.
Yeah,
You
so
got to think big picture.
you would consider outside the second lien. It's just got to be the right circumstances,
That's right.
which I think makes sense. I mean, like I said, most people don't have enough equity to support third, fourth, and fifth position liens. So I would say in general, most people won't go beyond the second. You see a lot of first, you see a lot of people that will do second, but usually unless it's seller finance, it almost doesn't make sense to build in more than that.
Yep, that's fair. Yeah.
Right? Because like you said, if the house ever gets foreclosed on or whatever and it gets sold, you need to make sure that that as is value can cover the first position and then your position if your position's not the first position.
Right. Yeah.
So it sounds like that, that's what you're typically looking at what about cross collaterals? So they're looking at, when they're showing you, hey, I have this in cross collateral, how much equity are you looking for in that property in order to secure the loan?
Within that specific property or within the portfolio that the borrower has?
I mean, I guess whatever they're offering as the collateral, since, and again, in this case scenario, sub twos typically don't have a lot of equity built in. So if you're lending, like, let's say that same 70K on somebody else's property, what, how much equity are you looking for available, whether it's in the subject or in the portfolio?
See, I know the people so well that I'm lending on, I almost know how much they're pulling in every month. And I know that they're pulling in enough every month that they could pay me off. Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. And again,
And I know not everybody's in that type of situation, but I don't just throw money out there to just,
Chris also said,
like I've already said too, I would much rather my money sit in the bank account and not accrue any interest than to have it in a bad deal.
that that's how he knows that you've got the knowledge, because most people won't do anything else regardless.
Oh, yeah. I have a lot of opinions.
Well, you've seen a lot in a short amount of time.
I have, but I'm also observant and I pay attention. And I also don't look, like some people look at things hoping to see something that sometimes isn't there. I just look at it for what it is. Like I'm not coulda, woulda, shoulda girl.
Right. Just like anything else. Like you and I were joking about dating before we got on the recording. It's like you have to look at the person for what they are, not what they could be. The same thing with the property.
Well, and like we talked about this too. Oh, another question.
Come on up, brother. What you got, Alexandros?
Oh,
Hey, how are you?
hi, how are you?
What's
I'm
up?
doing well, thank you. So I want to ask two, three questions, not for this deal in particular, but generic questions around co-living, if that's okay.
Yeah, what you got?
Okay. First question was your co-host is looking to get a money partner for 50% of equity. And is she coming up with the other 50%, or how she's gonna structure the deal, and how much each of them is going to get paid from the net profits every month?
So that was what we had what we were addressing, right? Is yes, you get 50% equity in the property, but she's already self-funded it. So she's brought the deal to the table. She's actually funded it herself. So
Okay.
there's no close of escrow. There
Were you
isn't.
thinking specifically about this deal, or you were just saying a general question, right?
It is kind of general because I try to understand how you bring a money partner,
Yeah.
and how do you structure every deal. Obviously every deal is different, depends how much work it needs and everything, right?
Yeah, yeah. Every deal is different, and everybody has a different way that they structure their deal to bring a private money partner in. One of my friends, Emma, the way she did it was she did a percentage back on the money, but you didn't get a 50-50 split in the cash flow. She did less percentage on the cash flow, and the interest on the money was not in interest only payments, because the cash flow numbers were still better.
Mhm.
So you would get the cash flow every month. You would get interest on the money at the time of refi after 2 or 3 years.
Mhm.
So it just depends on the goals of the property. Like Bree's in this one for the long haul, and she's not looking to refi or sell it. She wants it to be a long-term buy and hold that's going to perform. That, you and her, in theory, in this case, would be partnered up, and y'all would be in this property together. It would make a lot of money. It would appreciate in value. You could claim the depreciation, And as the population grows in that area in San Antonio, the rents will also go up eventually too.
I see.
Yeah, I think it
And
just depends on, like, to Adam's point, it just depends. I mean, I've seen other deals too where it's like, you come to the table, there's a 50-50 equity split, but the person who's bringing the money to the table is walking away with like 60% of the cash flow for X amount of years. I've also seen people who've walked away with 100% of the cash flow until they're paid back. And I don't like to say paid back because you're not getting paid back essentially, right? Because you're putting your money into the deal. But and I've seen 50-50 split. It's however you and your partner want to structure the deal so that you guys are both, creating that win-win. You're both happy.
and what happens if one of your partners, let's say, one day decide to say, I'm out, just pay me back my equity, I don't want to deal with this deal anymore?
Yeah, so I think that's a conversation. Well, not I think. Let me use stronger words than that. That's a conversation you have early on, and you put that in a contract. I think, for me, I've always made it very clear that I'm looking to hold, like for this particular property, I'm going to hold it a minimum of 5 years and evaluate. Do I still want to hold it? Do I want to sell, or 10 years? I think it just depends on your partner. I've seen people where they've said, you can get your money out of this deal, but you're not walking away with any equity. So you'll get paid back, but get the cash flow over X amount of years. But I mean, it just depends. I mean, but it's a valid question, right? Because things happen, life happens, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
People are in these situations where they're like, you know what? I need my money out tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's also why, Alexandros, most of those partnerships are secured through an LLC and an operating agreement, because the operating agreement is more likely to hold up in court. And the operating agreement is usually a little bit more detailed than your typical JV would be. So there's, in the operating agreement, there's usually some kind of clause as to like dissolution or voting out the other partner, or like if all hell breaks loose, if we want to sell the property, how do we sell the property? If we want to refi to buy that partner out, like, do they walk away with equity? Do they not walk away with equity? To Bri's point, because even if they do walk away with equity, it's probably going to be minimal, probably going to be a lot lower than what they initially had.
And okay, and the last question I have is like, you buy a property, you bring the partner, and let's say next week, at the end of the month or September 1st, we decide to bring inside the tenants. How do you make sure you bring all, how can you bring all the tenants in the property the same day so you start performing at 100% from day one? Or you bring them one by one? Because like co-living, obviously, you have to screen the tenants. It's not like you have a regular tenant that comes with his family. It's like 3, 4, 5 applications.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Well, I think there's a ramp up period, right? It's not like you go into it. I mean, sure, it's a home run if you can get 4 applicants and they all move in right away, right? But I mean, realistically, there's a ramp up period. So it's just dependent on timing. I'll tell you, I have a property manager for this property, but I also want to get on the phone and talk to these people too, because I've seen property managers just throw in the worst tenants, and I'm a little bit more selective. I don't want just, I mean, I shouldn't say this, but I'm looking for a certain tenants type.
I would say too, it comes to, like she said, it's a ramping up period. It's a pre-selling period. It's just like any new development, right? If I'm building an apartment complex from the ground up, I am selling the shit out of that apartment complex. We're putting the renderings up. We're saying, look, we're taking new tenants. We're doing this leasing special. We're doing this and that and the other thing. And so you want to market the property as much as you can. Probably while you're in the rehab period is what I would say, right? Like you're not doing, because you're not doing a ground up. So you're not doing any level of development. But most properties you acquire, whether they're sub 2, seller finance, hybrid, doesn't really matter. There's going to be some level of rehab required. Like even people I've seen that have acquired like 2022, 2023 builds sometimes, just because people don't live to the same standard that you might, still require rehab. So I would say during that 4 to 6 weeks that you're doing all that rehab, that whether it's $10,000 worth of rehab or $5,000 worth of rehab or $100,000 worth of rehab, you are marketing the hell out of that property. You're putting it out there. Maybe your property manager is putting it out there for you. Maybe you're putting it out there. You're putting it on Marketplace or in groups, or you're putting it on Craigslist, like whatever your marketing methods are. And you are marketing the hell out of it. So then that way, like you said, you can get 4 applications. Maybe you get 12 applications. You sift through them, you find the 4 best ones, and you tell them, hey, guess what? Move in date is August 15th. Cool. Have your shit ready. Here's your key.
Something else that I do, a little tip to your point about like the timing. I'll just throw up the property on Facebook Marketplace and I'll set like a great to have price per room. You can already start to gauge like what the level of interest is. And you're not, and you're putting it out there, hey, looking, available to rent like 30 days out. But you're giving yourself some of that time just to kind of understand the market too, right? What's the interest level? Because you don't want to have this property that's locked and loaded and ready to fill tenants and then try to play that pricing game. So the sooner you can get it marketed and you get a better sense of like, what the market demand is and what's a good price point, I think the better too.
Here's another question I was thinking about that. You are not working with agencies, correct? You are just looking for individuals who try to find a cheap rent, a cheap room, and just live there. Is that correct?
They're looking to rent by the room.
Yes. When we're talking about co-living,
Yeah.
you rent by the room. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, but you don't work with agencies, with the government, like
No.
no,
Not
you
you.
don't.
No.
You can. So
Don't.
yeah. So what we were talking about earlier in the call, where like there's a bunch of different forms
Programs, right?
of group homes that are coming up, right? Like if you're looking at assisted living for seniors, if you're doing intellectually disabled communities, if you're doing sober living, if you're
Yep.
doing transitional housing or halfway homes or prison rehabilitation, veterans, those would be the types of co-livings that are still under the umbrella of co-living, where you'd be working with those agencies, and that's where the additional red tape comes in. But like Bri's not working directly with a government agency nor like any other kind of staffing agency or anything like that. It's not That's more like in the midterm space where you see people will work with, like, let's say insurance agencies, because that's what midterm is. A lot of the midterm clients are is like, I was recently displaced from my home. I need a place to go. I called up State Farm. State Farm referred me to Bree, said that she has a home in the area that I can rent for 3 to 9 months while we wait for that's furnished, that I don't need to do anything for, while we wait for my home to be rehabilitated so I can live in it.
Interesting. Okay.
That's kind of the big difference between the exit strategies as I see it.
Have you ever thought about finding an on-market house that is for rent from an owner, right? And it's like 4-2, and you go over there and you talk to him and you tell him, you know what? How about I will take your house and I will sublease it. Is that okay with you? And you just get a ready house to rent it out to 4 people. And if it makes sense, to raise the rents per room and start from there, because obviously the owner just wants to collect the rent. So
I've heard of people doing that.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
STR arbitrage is more popular, or at least it was back in the day. A lot of leasing agreements have been updated to make sure that, like, if it's subletting, like that I'm subletting it to you and that you're living in the house, right? Like I have a family, therefore I require a 3-2, and you have a family, therefore you require a 3-2, as opposed to I'm subletting to 4 separate tenants. So it's becoming less and less common, I would say. It is possible, but you'd have to be very diligent in looking at those leasing agreements before you sign any of them. And I would say, probably to be on the safe side, run it past the landlord first. Because again, just because it's not in the leasing agreement doesn't mean the landlord's going to be happy if you do it. You know,
Interesting.
I imagine Bree would be probably pretty upset if she was renting it to me as a 4.3 or a 4.2.5, and I got this deal, right? I'm paying $1,800 a month, and then she finds out, she's like, "Dude, wait, what?
You
You're
make
actually
money too.
renting it out
On top
for
of that.
I'd be hunting you down, Adam.
yeah." Like, wait, you're actually collecting $3,600 a month on this property that's mine, and you're
On
keeping
my
the spread?
house.
Yeah, you're keeping the spread. She go Italian mafia on my ass. Look at her. She's laughing. She knows it's true.
I wouldn't be happy.
Yeah.
But I think if you're targeting like a tired landlord, maybe there's going to be more room for negotiations with that. Someone who's not, who's willing to give up that type of autonomy, so to speak, to have you try to fill the property, and they don't mind if you're profiting from it because maybe they're losing money on it. Had you
Yeah,
not,
I mean, yeah. No, I understand. So sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
that's all I had to say. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, you can find a property that loses money and the owner rents out the property, and you go over there, you say, okay, yeah, you want 2,000, I will give you 22 if you let me to sublease the property to other people. And you go from there. Maybe you can make $1,000, for example.
Yeah. Sublets, like I said, are getting hard to find, and I would also argue tired landlords can be getting harder to find. So I would almost argue that it would be more advantageous for you if you find a tired landlord to just negotiate the acquisition price, because if you can do that, usually you can get a hell of a deal, and then you keep the appreciation and depreciation of the property as well.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Right.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
Let
Thank
me
you.
guess. Let me guess. You're Greek.
Yes, I am.
I only know Tikanis. That's it.
Kala, kala, kala,
There
kala.
we go. Just a little bit.
Thank you very much. Thank you for
I
your time.
see you. Yep,
I was gonna say, Bree, you have your Italian passport, right? Like,
I do. But I also have, I've growing up, I've had a lot of Italian and Greek friends. So
we have one Greek Orthodox church here, and that's what we went to this past Memorial Day. Was they do a big Greek fest, so it's a lot of fun. I ran into one of my best friends there. He's like, "What are you doing here?" Like, I don't know, bro. What are you doing here? He's like, "I'm the MC."
yeah.
Like, oh shit. But yeah, guys, definitely to that point with the tired landlords, if you can find it, I would negotiate it, acquire it if you can. You can usually get a hell of a deal. Like, again, if Bree was a tired landlord, what would she pay to get out of the property? Probably anything. That's usually where most of the good off market deals are. It's a really good seller motivation if you can find it.
Oh, looks like you have a visitor behind you.
Oh yeah. She's always running around causing some level of chaos, usually chewing on me while I'm trying to do stuff.
Horrible.
Yeah. She's a hot mess.
So what other questions do you guys have? Anything?
I'm shocked. Like I said, you must have done a really good job answering everybody's questions, Brie, without even knowing it. Chris had also said that there's a lot of people that think that they are in sub 2 and they should know, but they really don't. I mean, yeah, Chris,
Yeah.
the knowledge gap inside of sub 2 is pretty big, but like I said, we do our best, as fellow community members to try to fill that gap. And I know Bree's somebody that's not afraid to give people the feedback if they bring her a deal.
And I'm kind about it. Maybe because what may not be a good deal for me may be a great deal for somebody else.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. But I think you're really reasonable both with your rates and what you're willing to look at on deals. Because you and I have talked about that before too. Like some of what we see in the community, people either want extraordinarily high ROIs or they want really high, interest rates, or they want to be first lien versus second lien. So.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that's one of the things you and I bonded on at first was I told you, I was like, I don't even bring people lenders if they want over a certain interest rate because it's just not reasonable.
Yeah, that's another thing that just, yeah. I've had people tell me they wouldn't look at anything below a 20% ROI.
And is that the interest or is that the cash on cash, just to clarify for people?
Oh, interest. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Because I know people that also won't look at deals unless it's 20% cash on cash or better. And it's the same thing. It's like you can get that, but your LTV has to be so low, your acquisition price has to be so low. Sometimes that it's not always feasible to hit that cash on cash on those deals, even on better cash flowing deals.
Well, and you know what I've said too. I mean, there's obviously advantages to going with private money lenders, but at some point, don't price yourself out so, far that, people are starting to look to more conventional ways of getting money.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot actually. One of the guys at our meetup recently was saying that he's able to get hard money rates cheaper and just as fast with the same amount of documents as what most PMLs want.
Yep. I've seen that too.
In fact, his hard money lender likes him enough that they just extended him a really big line of credit. So he's like, dude, I don't even need private money. Like, why bother?
Yeah. That's
And,
fair.
and it's not full doc because they know me well enough at this point. I've done 3 or 4 deals with him. Like, why not?
Why not? Is right.
And that's the balance, I think, because private money lenders are still selling something at the end of the day. They're selling the money. They're selling the money, the convenience, and the time saved. And, granted, one of the things I always advocate for is to keep your private money lender safe and feeling comfortable. There is no shortage of things that they can and should require that you should be willing to supply. However, that's the balance, right? The more that the private money lenders require, the less borrowers are going to come to them.
That's right. And I look at it too, like every time I'm lending money, I mean, I'm continuing to build that relationship, right? And then there are times where, someone that I've been lending to knows somebody and can vouch for them. And, then that's also an opportunity for me to also expand my network, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
So
I can see
I love him. He's
a
so
little fuzzy tail floating around in the background.
I see sometimes I like animals more than I like humans. Like I have these things.
Well, that's because the animals can't lie to you.
They love you unconditionally.
It's all right there on their face.
Yeah. Thanks, Katie.
Love you too, Katie. Um, but yeah, dude. I mean, is there anything else that you look for? Like anything, any kind of parting wisdom we should kind of impose on people here?
A lot of smoke and mirrors out there. Just do your due diligence and take your time. And if you lose out on a deal, so what? So you lose out on it. There's going to be more out there to be had. And just don't run into a burning building. Sometimes I see people do that. Just take your time.
Yeah.
Just be smart about, smart and diversify and look for opportunities too that align with your goals.
It sounds like don't get sold on the urgency, right? Because all the good deals go fast is what you always hear. And I mean, it's true, but that's where a lot of smoke and mirrors lie too.
Yeah, and I think it's a little different too. Like when you look at like the acquisition versus lending, right? Like, yeah, I think you got in some ways with acquisition, you got to move a little bit quicker. But when it comes to like lending, say, just don't be distracted by like, what the returns are, because I've seen a lot of people lose money over that. A lot of people, and I'll tell you, like in the beginning, I don't want to lend to anybody. I was like, this is a disaster. Like,
Yeah.
And yeah, there was a good, I'd say 4 or 5 months where I didn't move any money. Thanks, Grady. So yeah,
Yeah, well, like I said, don't get sold into running into the burning building. You know, like I said, listen to Bree, do your due diligence, be smart, verify everything, trust but verify.
check again.
Yeah, and like I said, just make sure that everything's there and it's in line, and have people that you know, like, and trust that you can go to for advice too. You know, you can always reach out to Bree or I kind of outside of this if you need help or you have questions.
Sure.
So, Bree, any final thoughts? We'll start tying this up and we'll do the outro, and
No,
that's
that's all good. Nice meeting everyone.
well, guys, I appreciate it. As y'all know, we do these every Sunday. If you have fun, if we made you think, if we made you laugh, if we made you smile, if we brought you value, please, the only thing that we ask is that you A, come back, and that B, you bring a friend next time. So until then, everybody, appreciate y'all.
Bye, everyone.
See y'all next time.